feel like I was turning this path and it was right up there in the woods.
I smell something.
Pretty close.
Man, see, it's strong right here. You smell it?
Up here on the right.
Like, could we see it? How far off was it?
I mean, I saw it. I mean, without even, I was running by.
Oh, there it is.
Yep. Found it. Am I right?
Yeah. All right, we're 1097. It's confirmed. It appears to be a female. The top half is decomposed. The bottom half has pants on or shorts. They're pulled down around the legs.
When a beloved teenager from the Orlando area vanished from her home, the investigators tasked with finding her could have never imagined the twisted and shocking series of events that would eventually lead them to the most sickening of motives. On the April morning of Friday the 13th, 2018, just 3 weeks after her 16th birthday, Justis Marie Garrett awoke much later than usual and missed her school bus. Her mother, 37-year-old Danielle Pratt, who had her hands full with Justis's 5-year-old sister, asked her fiancé, 39-year-old Robert Bobby Kern, if he would drive Justis to school, and together they dropped the teen off at Mount Dora High, expecting her to get a ride home later on the bus. When Justis failed to return home that day, her mother assumed she was with one of her many friends and wasn't immediately concerned. However, by the next morning, when Danielle still hadn't heard from her daughter, she started to get a sickening feeling and hurriedly called the police to report Justis missing. Police initially questioned whether Justis had simply run away, if only for the weekend, as the teen had recently been forced to change schools as a result of her family moving to Sorrento just a few months prior. This sort of transition can be difficult for anyone, but especially for a straight-A high school student midway through their sophomore year. So police assumed this to be typical teen behavior, and the girl was likely spending the weekend with friends. Her friends, however, insisted Justis was responsible and exceedingly mature for her age, and her mother stated that she had no reason to run away. In fact, the more people the police spoke to about Justis, the clearer it became that something had to be seriously wrong, as everyone had only good things to say about the 16-year-old. Other friends assured the investigators that she wasn't depressed, she didn't take illicit substances, and she wouldn't just run away, even though her mom moved her around frequently. This last part was certainly true. Over the past few years, the family had moved multiple times for unknown reasons, but in each school Justis attended, she left with a new group of devoted friends, most of whom she seemed to keep in touch with after leaving. The police definitely had their work cut out for them during the initial interviewing process, talking to literally dozens of teens about the missing girl. Soon, bizarre rumors had started circulating on social media. Among them, Justis had been spotted sleeping in cemeteries, or she was being hidden at the house of a friend after running away. These rumors all turned out to be falsehoods told with the goal of selfishly gaining attention, and those most loyal to Justis started picking fights with the ones suspected of spreading the misinformation, leading to at least one girl being suspended from school at that time. Police eventually narrowed down the massive pool to a handful of Justis's closest school friends to talk to them about the missing teen's behavior at school on Friday, or if they had been with her at any point that weekend. What they learned from these friends completely derailed their prior assumptions and caused the investigation to be drastically rerouted. Not only had Justis not been with them that weekend or Friday afternoon, but none of them had seen Justis at school that day. A Snapchat posted at 6:48 a.m. to Justis's account shows that the teen had been dressed and ready for school just before leaving the house that day. But no one at Mount Dora High could recall seeing Justis on April 13th. How odd, thought the investigators, that Justis seemingly vanished between being dropped off at school at 7:25 a.m. and actually making it into the building for first period. Before investigators could dive deeper into this unusual development, a heartbreaking and tragic new piece of evidence would come to light. The following footage has never been seen before.
Yep. So I think we passed like Quinmasset Road when we came in. So if we kept walking west, we'd run into the road. It's hard to know which way these trails are
I know, and
out above.
what I did was I walked straight out east. That way I knew the sun was on my back, but that marking there, so we're right in the area.
You're not going to be able to follow us all the way back here. We've taken a number of different trails. Right now we're headed in an easterly direction. We're trying to find the trail that he saw it on. If it's possible, we may have, if we could get Air 1 to come up, maybe assist. It's getting real dark back here now.
I don't know.
There should be a whole bunch of vultures near it.
Way out.
I'm seeing any footprints.
I think if it was anywhere, it's back up in this trail. I see my dog looks right here.
Lots of trees down. Smell anything yet? Let's see if they got our footprints.
Yeah, there's boots right there, right?
Yep, those are our boot prints, yep.
Alright, so find a different place.
I smell something.
Get close.
Man, see, it's strong right here.
Yeah,
Smell
I think it's up here on the right a little farther. There, yeah, we're getting there now. I mean, it's got to be right in this. I feel like I was turning this path and it was right up there in the woods right there.
Like, could we see it? How far off was it?
I mean, I saw it. I mean, without even, I was running by. I was like,
Oh, there it is.
Yep. Found it. Yep. Am I right?
Yeah. All right, we're 1097. It's confirmed. It appears to be a female. The top half is decomposed. The bottom half has pants on or shorts. They're pulled down around the legs. It's about 10 feet off the trail, so.
Tragically, just 4 days after she was reported missing, Justis's body was discovered in a wooded area off Gasline Road in DeLand, a town roughly 30 minutes from Sorrento. A longtime member of the Daytona Hash House Harriers, a runners club based out of Daytona, Florida, had been out for a game of hares and hounds that morning when he stumbled across the grisly sight. When this particular runner took off into the woods to track the hare on the morning of April 18th, he had no earthly idea that what he would actually find that day was one of the most gruesome and heartbreaking crime scenes in DeLand's history. Justis's body was heavily decomposed, and there was ample evidence of animal activity, but it was clear from the state of her remains that she had been the victim of a brutal crime. The body was found about 10 feet off the jogging path, with the top half being mostly skeletal, and the bottom half and remaining clothing, such as pants left pulled down around the ankles as the officer mentioned, were later found to have been covered in bleach. Their worst fears now confirmed, the police began to redouble their efforts and questioned everyone again in a newfound state of urgency, determined to find the person who had brutally killed Justis. They started with the jogger who had found the body. He told police he'd seen a man in a hoodie near the path on the day he found the remains, but when the man heard the approaching police sirens, he took off into the woods. Curious to see if this man was seen near the school, detectives requested footage of the drop-off zone at Mount Dora High on the morning of the 13th, and upon receiving it, were quite surprised by what they saw, or more accurately, what they didn't see. Not only was no one suspicious seen at the school that morning, but neither was the dark blue Ford Explorer containing Danielle, Robert, and Justis that should have been in the student drop-off zone at 7:25 a.m. Danielle and Robert both told investigators this was the time and vehicle in which they had dropped Justis off. So why was there no record of it anywhere on school grounds? Faced with the death of her daughter and increased pressure from police, it was at this point on April 29th that Danielle finally cracked and admitted the truth to investigators. Danielle and her fiancé Robert hadn't taken Justis to school the morning she disappeared. Instead, Robert had dropped her off somewhere in Sorrento so she could meet a friend. Detectives demanded to know the name and location of the friend, and Robert had to admit that he didn't exactly know, stating that he only knew that it might have been a boy and that Justis had been asked to be dropped off and picked up later. Since Robert had a handyman job waiting for him up in Volusia County that day, he didn't press her for details, but instead complied with the teen's request. Wanting to be liked by your prospective spouse's children is a somewhat reasonable excuse for Robert to behave this way, But why would Danielle lie about being in the car that morning? Well, as it turns out, she didn't want to get Robert in trouble for driving with a suspended license when it was she who had asked him to drive Justis to school that day. Now understanding why the two had initially lied, investigators were invigorated by their new lead. If they could track down the friend Justis had been with, it was likely that he or she was the last person to have seen her alive. But there was one big problem. Neither Robert nor Danielle knew anything about this person. Desperate to discover who the friend was, police had no choice but to turn back to Justis's friends. It was here that they finally caught a break, when one friend mentioned a possible lead, a boy Justis may have been flirting with on Instagram. While it was true that Justis didn't have a boyfriend, according to her friends, she'd been commenting on and liking a boy's posts, and that they may have been on the verge of dating. The only problem was the friend also didn't know the boy's handle or his full name, so the police had to dig through Justis's social media account to find any contact she may have made through the platform, and what they found was disturbing. Direct messages that had been sent to the teen's Instagram during the weeks leading up to her death read as follows. "You're a cutie. How old are you? You got a BF. Talk to me, beautiful. You don't like guys. I love your cover photo. God, you're sexy as f." All the messages came from the same profile, one supposedly belonging to an 18-year-old muscle-bound young man living in the area, though no one matching the photos had ever attended any of Justis's schools or was recognized by anyone who knew her. Even though Justis herself never responded to any of these messages, detectives felt confident that the owner of this Instagram account was the key to solving this case, and, as it turns out, they were right. However, not in the way anyone could have possibly imagined. Upon obtaining the information to trace the account back to the phone it was linked to, investigators finally learned the shocking truth. The phone didn't belong to an 18-year-old besotted schoolboy at all. It belonged to a middle-aged man by the name of Robert Bobby Kern. That's right, it was the loving stepfather. Police wasted no time tracking him down and confronting him with this new development. It was here the loving, almost stepfather facade broke down entirely, and Robert was no longer willing to cooperate with investigators. This, coupled with the earlier lies about driving Justis to school, were big red flags, some which prompted detectives to place Robert Kern under arrest and re-examine everything they knew about him. First, investigators wanted to know if Justis knew it had been Robert who had been sending her the messages, or if he had ever behaved inappropriately towards her. It's unknown, but it's not hard to imagine she didn't know yet, since despite Danielle referring to Robert as her fiancé, they'd only been dating since the late fall of the previous year, and Robert only stayed at the house periodically. It's entirely possible Robert did make her uneasy. However, despite him telling investigators how they were already practically family, one of her closest friends, Rochelle, was quick to point out that he was definitely not her stepfather.
Yeah, it was Friday night, and her mom's boyfriend came to my house and was like, "Oh, have you guys seen Justis?" and stuff like that. I said,
that was on Friday?
Yeah, Friday night. He came to my house.
Is that the stepdad or real dad?
It's a stepdad. It's like her mom's boyfriend. He's not really like a stepdad. She just like got with him, I guess, or something like recently.
This had been the first time Rochelle had ever seen Robert since Justis had always stayed over at Rochelle's house. She stayed over so frequently, in fact, that investigators had to question if Justis was uncomfortable in her own home.
She'll always be at my house, and then like when she moved, I'll talk to her like a couple times a week, probably, like only text her. And then I started like calling her more like after her birthday, and then we started like calling each other, and then she started like staying over my house like on the weekends.
How many times do you think she's been to your house?
A lot, all the time. Like too much for me to count, because it used to be like literally like a whole month she stood at my house. My mom
Does she not like being home or something?
I don't know. That's what my mom was saying. Like the other day, me and my mom and my sister were talking, and my mom was like, well, like she used to stay over here and you guys never go sleep over at her house. So it kind of seems like she don't like being at her house and stuff like that. I don't know, it's because like I don't know why. She never really told me nothing like that. I don't know, when her dad came to my, not her dad, when her mom's boyfriend came to my door Friday, like that night, when he asked me, he kind of scared me. Like, he looked a little bit creepy. And my mom was like, oh, like, what if she don't like being at home because of him? Like, what if he, like, we never know, he could be doing anything. Like, he looks creepy, he looks weird. But
other than looking creepy, why did he give you a bad vibe? Did he say something? Did he act a certain way?
He didn't act a certain way. He just looked like weird. Like, he just looked
weird. Like what? Like, what would he do? What do you think?
I don't know. He just looks.
Would you want to leave the house with that guy?
No, I wouldn't even want him in my house, to be fully honest with you.
Rochelle may have not been able to articulate exactly what it was about Robert that made her suspicious, but investigators were definitely starting to get a clearer idea. Convinced they were on the right track, they dug deeper into his background, scouring his past and the rest of his phone records, and what they found was sickening. The following may be too disturbing for some viewers. It turns out that Robert did have a criminal record, including 2 counts of burglary from the early 2000s, but it was his internet search history that proved the most damning. Police found searches such as knockout drugs, GHB, and chloroform, along with several searches for father-daughter, between father and daughter, and brunette in the woods in the weeks leading up to Justis's disappearance. In addition, the location of Robert's phone matched Justis's for the entire morning, showing that instead of driving the teen to school, Robert had driven them both straight to the woods and to land, where the phone stayed stationary for over an hour in the location where Justis's remains were later found. It was during this stationary period, a time Robert originally claimed he'd been working a handyman job in Volusia County, that investigators believe he dragged the teen from the car into the woods, then proceeded to brutally assault and murder her. The medical examiner later testified that the cause of death was most likely strangulation, though this couldn't be definitively proven since a key neck bone was missing from the body at the time of discovery. In addition to her pants being pulled down around her ankles and drenched in bleach, Justis's sweatshirt and bra were found pushed up around her neck, and her nose had been violently broken shortly before her death. The state of Justis's clothing and Robert's search history leave little question as to motive, though we will probably never know for certain, as Robert never testified. The defense didn't call a single witness to the stand, but that may have been due to the overwhelming amount of evidence stacked against him. In addition to the plethora of lies Robert had told investigators and the information gathered from his phone, bits of plant matter from the exact area Justis's remains were found were located in his car after he stated he had never been to the area. Danielle later testified at trial, saying Robert had convinced her not to call the police when Justis first appeared to have gone missing. In one final twist, investigators discovered that on April 16th, Robert's phone pinged at the location of the murder for a short period of time. It's believed that this was when he dumped bleach over Justis's remains in an effort to further cover his tracks. As stated by the prosecutors in the case against Robert, Justis Marie Garrett was entirely a victim of circumstances. Those who loved her will remember her for the beautiful and kind soul she was, and the lives she brightened along the way. It took the jury only 30 minutes to find Robert Kern Jr. guilty, and he was subsequently sentenced to life in prison with an additional 5 years for tampering with evidence.